In 2018, investigators noticed something terrifying during a murder interrogation. The suspect looked calm, relaxed, almost emotionless. But then the detective stayed silent for just 7 seconds, and suddenly everything changed. The suspect adjusted his posture, started over-explaining, and his breathing shifted. Within minutes, cracks started appearing in his story. Former FBI interrogators call this moment behavioral leakage, because no matter how intelligent someone is, the human brain was never designed to carry guilt perfectly. And the most dangerous criminals often expose themselves in ways invisible to ordinary people. Most people think interrogations are about intimidation, bright lights, aggressive detectives, people screaming across a table. But elite investigators know the truth is much darker. Real interrogation is psychological observation because deception leaves patterns, tiny fractures in speech, emotion, memory, and body language. And the top 0.01% of experts don't just listen to words. They watch for moments where the brain loses synchronization with itself. That's where the truth begins leaking out. Before serious questioning even starts, elite interrogators establish something called a baseline. This means studying how a suspect behaves while relaxed, how fast they speak, how often they blink, how they breathe, where their eyes naturally move. Because without normal behavior, you cannot detect abnormal behavior. And this is where many guilty suspects make their first mistake. They become too controlled, too careful. Their movements suddenly look mechanical, and their speech becomes unnaturally precise. Why? Because lying overloads the brain. The suspect is trying to create a believable story, monitor the detective's reactions, hide emotional stress, and avoid contradictions all at the same time. Neuroscientists discovered this creates measurable cognitive strain. Truth is automatic, lies require construction, and construction leaves microscopic errors. One of the most powerful interrogation weapons isn't shouting, it's silence. Former homicide detectives say silence can psychologically pressure suspects harder than aggression ever could. Here's why. Human beings are biologically programmed to seek social feedback. When someone asks a question, your brain expects a response. But skilled interrogators sometimes do something disturbing. They ask a question and then say absolutely nothing. No reaction, no movement, just silence. And for guilty suspects, silence becomes unbearable because the brain starts panicking. Did I say too much? Do they know something? Why aren't they responding? So suspects begin filling the silence themselves, and the more they talk, the more behavioral leakage appears. This exact technique appeared in the interrogation of Chris Watts. Investigators noticed that when silence stretched too long, his explanations became increasingly unnatural and over-detailed, almost as if his brain was trying to outrun anxiety. But the most unsettling signs often appear in language itself, because guilty minds unconsciously distance themselves from crimes. For example, an innocent person might say, "I didn't kill her." Simple, direct, emotional. But deceptive suspects often say things like, "I would never do something like that." Notice the difference. The brain avoids directly attaching itself to the event. Experts call this psychological distancing, and once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Investigators also analyze emotional timing. Innocent people usually react emotionally first. "What? That's insane." But guilty suspects often react strategically. "What evidence do you have?" Because innocent people focus on shock, while guilty people focus on survival. And here's the terrifying part. Most liars prepare facts. They don't prepare emotions. That's where interrogators catch them. Elite interrogators rarely ask direct questions first. Instead, they ask unexpected sensory questions. What could you smell in the room? What was the weather like outside? What were you doing 5 minutes before it happened? Because real memories contain randomness, texture, emotion, and sensory detail. Fabricated stories don't. Fake stories feel organized, clean, almost rehearsed. But authentic memories are messy, and neuroscience explains why. When humans remember real experiences, multiple sensory regions activate naturally. But fabricated memories rely heavily on cognitive construction, which means liars often pause longer before answering unexpected questions. Their brain is literally building reality in real time, and those tiny delays can reveal more than the words themselves. But interrogation science also uncovered something disturbing. Confessions are not always truth. For decades, investigators used aggressive systems like the Reed technique to psychologically pressure suspects into admitting guilt. Sometimes it worked, but sometimes innocent people confessed too, especially teenagers, exhausted suspects, and psychologically vulnerable individuals. Under enough stress, the brain prioritizes escape over accuracy. Modern investigators now understand something critical. A confession alone is not proof, which is why advanced interrogation today focuses less on intimidation and more on behavioral analysis, cognitive stress, and psychological consistency. The goal is no longer forcing confessions. It's detecting when the human mind begins collapsing under deception. So the next time you watch an interrogation, don't just listen to the suspect. Watch the pauses, the breathing changes, the over-explaining, and the strange emotional timing. Because the most dangerous criminals rarely expose themselves through violence alone. They expose themselves through tiny psychological fractures their brain was never designed to hide forever. And maybe that's the most disturbing discovery of all. The human mind can lie to detectives, lie to family, lie to the entire world. But under pressure, it eventually starts telling on itself. Subscribe for more dark psychology, criminal analysis, and interrogation science videos that most people never notice.